Kuya Recruiting Nation, Chief Totimeh here. Welcome back to episode 13 of Uncharted Waters with the one, the only, the people's champ, Admiral James Waters. Today, we have a phenomenal guest with us. This special guest has served under 6 U.S. presidents, three of which have served in 2 terms. Over 35 years of knowledge, wisdom, and leadership. Today we have Fleet Master Chief Delbert Terrell Jr. Master Chief, welcome.
Wow, thanks for making me feel just a little bit less young and old. Wow. Appreciate that.
It's experience.
Yeah, experience. I like that. I like that.
Hoo-yah. So Master Chief, from Kingfisher, Oklahoma.
Yes.
What drove you to join the United States Navy?
Wow, that's a great question. So obviously Kingfisher graduated in '88. From there, decided to go to college. Oklahoma Junior College, thought I was pretty good in sports and basketball, and probably made it. No, it's not probably. I made it about 9 months. So driving back and forth to Oklahoma City to Kingfisher, partying, kind of hanging out, working. I needed some discipline in my life, and then from there, recruiter was on me when I was a senior there at Kingfisher, and then the rest is kind of history. Didn't know what I wanted to do in the Navy. Recruited me, went to MEPS, and first thing that came up was an electrician. Said, make $25 on the outside. So I figured I'd come in, do 5 years, and move back to Oklahoma.
Yeah, get your path set.
Exactly.
Go back and wire some stuff in Oklahoma.
Yes. Still working on that 5 years.
I love it. So, Master Chief, what's your current view of the recruiting landscape?
My view is I'm pretty giddy inside and thankful and grateful, not only for what the leadership has done in Recruiting Nation, but also for the recruiters and the sailors in recruiting. What you've done with the environment, the adversity, is pretty outstanding. So I've had the opportunity to travel around over the past couple of years. In talking to sailors and speaking to them, I just cannot thank you enough for what you do in this environment. And it's pretty positive. So my view, I think, along with a lot of other people, is pretty good.
Yeah.
Really positive.
Yeah, and I think it's really important to note here, when Chief Totimeh introduced you as your Fleet Master Chief, but for the recruiters that don't know, Fleet Master Chief Terrell is the Chief of Naval Personnel's Fleet Master Chief. So he is right with the Chief of Naval Personnel, Vice Admiral Cheeseman, throughout his, sort of daily walk in the job. And so the perspective that you're getting is coming from, a very elevated view, and one that you've had a chance to really, when you say travel, I mean, you've really traveled, right? Career development symposia, to just individual recruiting stations, to, graduations probably from boot, all those kinds of things. As you've watched, and you've been in the job, a couple of years?
A couple of years, just over 2 years, yes, sir.
Yeah. And for the recruiters, Fleet T and I served together when I was N13, for, I don't know, what's that, a year and a half of that yes, time. And we've had some engagements with the media together, yes, and plus, many other things. But it, sort of as you've watched this transition over time, what are some of the things that stand out about recruiting, recruiters, recruiting command, that, stand out about, that are different now than maybe as you watched it early in your tour?
I think that's a great question, sir. I would say from when I first got in to now, this is going to sound kind of crazy. I don't want to say not much, but I think it's the environment. So coming out of COVID, adapting to COVID and how we recruit and talk and tell the stories, to now, the motivation, understanding the environment, travel. I think about going to Mid-America and talking to the recruiters and the sailors there, and what they tell me is just all about sharing the story with the the future sailor, but also their family,
Yeah.
and having those conversations. And for those young leaders, for you to do that, alone and unafraid, we are relying on you to tell that story and bring in those future sailors. So it has been great through the adversity to think outside the box and how we bring in these young men and women to serve and support and defend our country. And then it's all about sharing experiences and stories. And I appreciate what they do. I appreciate what you do, which has been great.
Yeah, those recruiters out there being authentic and recognizing that they are the United States Navy to that future sailor, to most of them who know nothing about the Navy outside of maybe what they saw in marketing and advertising. And that young future sailor is looking up to that recruiter to help them understand. And I think, speaking with authenticity, the value proposition of the Navy, along with the fact that there are hard days and there's hard work, right? Nobody's shying away from that.
Right.
So anyway, thank you for that.
And I mean, if I can,
Please.
the ability for the recruiters, ability for you to get up in the morning and drive 100 miles or whatever the case may be, for one person, let them know, hey, you're important to me, and then providing those opportunities to come in the Navy and be a better version of themselves and join this team, that means a lot to all of us.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, Master Chief, after 35 years, how do you feel the youth currently view the armed forces in the United States Navy generally?
I think they're all on board. I think it might be a myth out there, but great example. Obviously, was in Oklahoma just a few weeks ago. Visited 3 recruiting stations. Visited a couple of high schools. Visited the University of Oklahoma. So had the opportunity to speak to that range between 18 and 22 and 23. They get it and they value service. So they understand it. They understand the military. It's positive. So when we talk about the younger age and serving and service and supporting our country, they absolutely understand that.
Yeah, I think there's this, to your myth point, we talk about propensity and propensity being lower now than it once was. And I think there's an implication that if propensity is lower, the opposite of propensity is anti. And it's not really. It's really, propensity represents those that know about and are interested in serving. The rest of it, there's certainly going to be people that are anti-service in there. But the vast majority are just people that don't know. Right? Which, as a recruiter, we need to see that as opportunity. Right? It's places where we make our own rain. Right? Where we're relentlessly prospecting. Where we're following up on leads. But also making our own leads by making those phone calls, going to the schools, and that kind of thing. And that's what's so amazing. You take a sailor that had succeeded in their initial tour on a ship, and then basically completely change what we're asking them to do. We give them a government car, a cell phone, and a laptop, and they are the Navy for the folks in Oklahoma.
Yes.
Right? It's amazing.
It's awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah. So, Master Chief, as the 19th director of the Senior Enlisted Academy, what advice do you have for some of the khaki leadership in the recruiting enterprise?
In the recruiting enterprise, let me just go the leadership in the Navy. I'll do both, but I think it's the same. So as a 19th director, my advice to the khaki leadership is, it's going to sound so harsh, but I've included myself. We're here to make a difference. We are here to provide opportunities for the sailors that work for us to remove barriers so they can do their job and be successful. That's what we need to do at leadership. And when we have the opportunity, whether we're traveling or we go back home, we have those conversations with those influencers and just take the time, one, to say thanks, and really that's all it takes, because that generates a conversation. Hey, are you still in the Navy? Yes, I'm still in the Navy. Where have you been? This is what I've done. And it just goes back to telling the story. So I would say that's my challenge to not only Khaki Leadership within recruiting, but Khaki Leadership everywhere. It only takes a couple of minutes.
Yeah.
Only takes a couple of minutes to do that.
Yeah, I love the idea of barrier removal with respect to Khaki Leadership, right? You know, we sometimes can get wrapped up in our own personal, I don't mean private, but personal challenges within the service. And as a Khaki leader, you know, recognizing that your primary duty is identifying and removing barriers for the sailors that are in your organization. I mean, that's so important.
Yes, sir.
And, you know, it's not just words, it's actions.
Yes, sir.
A willingness to lean in and say, this isn't right. And if it's something that you have the authority to fix, then fix it, obviously. Mm-hmm. But if you don't, you elevate it so that we can fix it.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Hoo-yah, hoo-yah. So, Master Chief, in your travels, because of what we do in recruiting ultimately impacts the fleet daily. In your travels, what is being said has affected the fleet the most or had the most significant impact?
I think, I'll speak for the last couple of years, I think the credibility of what Recruiting Nation is doing, what you are doing, that credibility box has increased. It's, you know, eyes wide open. It was, you guys, it was tough the last year or so in regards to recruiting. And I think, you know, the fleet might have doubted, you know, Recruiting Nation. And you have rise to that. You have rise and you have gotten after it and you have thought outside the box and how to make a difference. So from the fleet now and looking forward, pretty excited about, you know, what you're doing, and what you're doing as well as far as recruiting, which is positive.
Yeah, and I think the the pride that recruiters can take in that is great. And I think the recent change that you were a part of supporting to put the recruiter badge on NWUs and importantly on post-tour uniforms allows recruiters to go into the fleet and, you know, show that, hey, it can be done, it can be
Yes.
great, and an opportunity to talk to sailors that are also interested in becoming recruiters. So, you know, sort of a recruit the recruiter, but it also acknowledges the value of those recruiters that they can continue to show. Hey,
Agree.
I was part of that. I was there when.
Agree. Completely agree, sir.
Yeah.
So, Master Chief, as we near the end of episode 13, for being Navy Recruiting's Fleet Master Chief, do you have any advice for recruiters currently out looking for the best and the brightest to man our fleet?
Tell your story. I think that's it. I believe a lot of people read autobiographies because when you read an autobiography, you put yourself in that person's position. When you tell your story to someone else, you talk about your experiences, what you've done. You talk about what the Navy has benefited you with. I used to didn't talk about it, but our two daughters, we went through the in vitro process. If we were not in the Navy, we wouldn't have been able to afford that. So you talk about those opportunities that sustain you and keep you in and have made you better for it. So I would say, tell your story. It's okay to do that. They want to hear that because as you're telling that story, they're picturing themselves in that story. And I think there's nothing better than that. That's a great conversation that we all need to have with whoever we come in contact with.
Yeah, that's great advice. That's great advice because authenticity is an incredible tool for recruiters. You know, it's not a sales pitch if you're telling your story, right? And we're advertising, we're working toward somebody joining a really good organization.
Yes.
Like I said, we are not, you know, selling cheap, you know, used cars here.
Right.
We are selling we're selling Mercedes and BMWs, and you keep going with the
agree.
Teslas, whatever the best brand is today. But a quality product, and that authentic story. And that's true of recruiters, and that's true of all sailors, but it's also true of veterans. When folks leave the service, so many are in a different place than they ever would have been had it not been for the United States Navy. And telling that story, and for recruiters, when you can connect in with veterans groups to encourage that authentic storytelling. And it can include the bad things that have happened, right? That the hard days, let me put it that way. Because people, that's part of building trust, right? Because they know it's not all rainbows and sunshine.
I agree.
Sir, closing remarks?
This has been awesome. Fleet, thank you so much for spending a few minutes with Recruiting Nation, giving some perspective from the ivory tower in D.C. Thanks for coming to Millington and engaging with the team here. It's great to have you.
Thanks, sir. If I may add one thing, just to the recruiters out there, I just want to make it clear. Thank you for what you do. And on behalf of the Chief of Naval Personnel, Admiral Cheeseman, we realize it, we recognize it, along with a lot of other leadership in the Navy. Your job is not easy. You're out there alone and unafraid. Continue to do great things. We truly appreciate what you're doing. Hoorah.
Thank you.
Recruiting Nation, thank you for tuning in to episode 13 of Uncharted Waters with the one, the only, the people's champ, Admiral James Waters. Chief Totimeh, out.